you for joining me here on this Vegan Plant-Based Summit. How are you today?
I'm brilliant. Thank you very much for having me on. I really appreciate it and excited to talk to you today.
Now, we're in the UK and the weather is a bit naff where we are. So where are you and what's your weather like?
Well, I don't want to make anyone jealous, but I'm in Bali in Indonesia, and it's hot. We've just come out of rainy season, but it's sunshine every day. It's about 30 degrees every day. It gets dark at like 6 p.m. every night, so you win some, you lose some.
Oh, so you've got a different story to most of my vegan and plant-based interviewees. Guests, should I call them? Do you want to just give us some background information on where it all started?
Yeah, sure. Well, I've been a vegan for like about 15 years or so, but before that I was vegetarian since I was a child, and I kind of linked the gaps. But I ended up in Bali. I used to work for charities doing charitable fundraising, and I ended up getting a job in Bali about 9 years ago now. So I moved over to start doing the exact same stuff, charitable fundraising and doing strategies and all this stuff that hopefully would help give charities a much better way to raise funds and communications and talk to their donors and things like that. So after being here a while, it was very difficult to drive around anywhere, to be honest, because there's a lot of street animals. So I ended up rescuing quite a few animals, and it's heartbreaking really, because there's so many animals that are on the street here. And I said to you, oh, it's 30 degrees and it's sunshine outside, but I spend a good portion of my time, I'm not sitting on the beach by swimming pools. I'm driving around, giving medication and food and taking animals to the vet and hopefully trying to get them rehomed and stuff like that. So that's my story very, very quickly. The other thing that I do is to try and fund all this. There's two ways that I try and fund all this. The first is through my own ethical vegan clothing brand. So I sell hoodies and all sorts of different interesting stuff on my website. And that helps me to fund some of the work that I'm doing. I also have a Patreon where people can give a little monthly something to help me to do all this. And that's very much appreciated as well.
Why, obviously you became vegan for the animals. I mean, that's clear, but what was it that triggered it? Was there an event in your life? Was it an individual? What started the journey?
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't really like an overnight vegan who has like this big epiphany at one time. But I was raised by my parents to love animals. Like I think most children, one of the lessons their parents teach them is you should love animals, you should treat them with compassion. And that's exactly the lesson that I was given. So I had lots of companion animals when I was a kid. I had chickens and things like that. I didn't realize that I was actually eating chickens for my dinner, even though I had pet chickens, and I wouldn't have liked it, but there was just this big disconnect. And I think it happens with a lot of children where they don't know where their food comes from. They don't really know that it was a living, breathing animal that didn't want to die. And they also don't know that you can live perfectly fine without doing all that stuff. So there was like a mini epiphany moment, I suppose, when I was in school, and my teacher at the time, Mr. Coburn, his name is, I'll never forget. He told the class that we were eating animals, and I think that was really brave of him because it wasn't in the curriculum, and I don't know how it came about, but I couldn't believe it. It just seemed so strange that I'd been told to love animals, and I did. I genuinely loved animals, but I was also eating them, and it was just this moment where I'd suddenly found out that the animals I loved were also the animals I was eating. So I went home that night and I said to my mum, I'm not eating meat anymore. I was about 10 years old, 9 or 10 years old. thankfully my mum was okay with it, and she was really cool, and fed me vegetarian until I moved out. And then when I grew up a little bit further, I started seeing how animals were treated in chicken farms and doing my own research. I actually worked in a chicken farm for a little bit. Such was the disconnect. I still, even though I had chickens and I decided not to eat them, I still thought that farms were a good thing for chickens and that they were having nice lives. I found out the exact opposite when I worked in a chicken farm, and I'd see what would happen to the chickens. And this was an RSPCA approved free range chicken farm, which is beyond belief. When you think RSPCA approved, you think chickens running around outside, but it was this big shed with 20,000 chickens. And one day I turned up and they were all gone, and I didn't know all of these things that we do in our agriculture industry, that you kill 20,000 chickens just to replace them with another 20,000 chickens after a few short months, just because their production goes down a little bit. So I cut out eggs then, and then the same thing happened with dairy about a year or two later. I remember believing that we were doing cows a favor by milking them, and that they might explode if I didn't drink their milk. I genuinely thought I was doing them a favor. So it's lucky for me the internet was really going by then, and I could see what we were doing, and I could make my choices based on what I was seeing, and I chose not to be part of the cruelty that happens with meat, dairy, eggs. So yeah, it's been a journey, but that was about 15 years ago now.
Most of us have been lucky enough to see documentaries where this sort of information is out there, but you've seen it firsthand. How do you sleep at night knowing that these images are imprinted in your brain and it's something that you're not going to forget ever?
Yeah, I'll never get some of the things I saw at that chicken farm, for example, out of my head. But what I will do is I'll try and use it to inspire me on, and that's why I try and do everything I can to promote the vegan cause. And just like I was saying with my little clothing brand as well, it's all trying to turn what was really a horrible experience, and still is, and it's still going on. And try and turn it into something positive in the way that you can actually be somebody who can do something to help, whether it's a really, really small amount, or whether it's, whether you end up opening a massive rescue farm, whatever it is, as long as you're doing something that can help, and you're speaking up for the animals that are suffering in our system, we can all make a difference. So it doesn't have to be like rescuing animals. It doesn't have to be sort of standing in the street with a placard. There's so many ways that you can be an activist for animals. And I like to think of myself as one, and I see that you're one as well, putting this together. And it's everything that we do to help animals through the experiences that we've had and what we've seen. If we can try and ball that up and turn it into something that can actually be a positive influence on other people, that's what I think is really important. So it is hard to sleep at night when you start thinking of what we're doing, but that only works as inspiration for me to keep on using my voice to be a voice for animals who don't have a voice themselves.
One of the things that you will have noticed throughout your travels is that these farms are huge. I mean, you've just said there's 20,000 chickens in one barn, and a lot of farms have more than one barn, and a lot of cattle ranches, they're acres and acres and acres. What sort of effect do you think that's having on the environment, considering that you have an eco-friendly clothing business?
Lucky for me, also at university, I studied sustainable development, and wrote my dissertation on exactly that thing, the sustainability of factory farming. Yeah, it's there's a lot of information out there these days, which is really fantastic because people can make their own decisions. But when you look at what we're doing to not just the animals, but to the environment and how that impacts on our health and the systems that we live in. It's really quite shocking, but you have to really go down the rabbit hole and really look into it to see what the impacts are. And once you've seen it, you can't really unsee it, and you can't really unlearn the stuff that you've learned about it. So it's with animal agriculture, it really is just one of the most destructive industry, whether it's raising forests to the ground so that we can feed animals that we then eat, whether it's giving animals food that could be given to people who are starving in countries that don't have food themselves. All of this, when you look at it, you can really get sad, really, because it shouldn't be happening. And if we really looked at what we were doing and said, is this the right thing to do? There's no way we'd be doing it. Not at a government level, not at an individual level.
Obviously, your t-shirt business is sustainable and eco-friendly. I believe that the products are made in Bali. Is that right? So you're actually helping the locals as well. Can you tell us a bit more about that? Because a lot of companies, what they do is they say the products are sustainable and they're eco-friendly, but then they will have them made on the other side of the world. But you're actually having them made locally.
When I was really starting all of this, I got looking into the fashion industry, and the way how a £3 t-shirt might end up in, for example, the UK high street. There is no way through the chain that anybody can really win apart from the retailer and obviously the consumer that gets it in the end. But almost everybody in the chain, until it gets into that shop, is losing out. So one of the key things for me was to find the materials myself, but also to find the places that produce them, so I can go and see where they're produced. They're all produced fairly by people here in Bali, Indonesia, and it's nice to know that you can actually do something that it's not that hard, really, to be honest. If you just find a decent production unit that pays their staff fairly, that will let you go in and take photos and things like that. It's one of these things that I was mentioning to you before. This is how the world should normally operate. It shouldn't be normal to have like this shady way of producing clothes where nobody knows who's made their clothes or where the clothes have come from. So one of the key things for me was not just making a t-shirt that says vegan on it, but making sure that the production of that t-shirt is exactly in keeping with the vegan lifestyle, which isn't just about not hurting animals. It's about not hurting the environment and extending that to being compassionate people, being compassionate for other people as well. So how can we sell a vegan t-shirt which is all about compassion if we're using some sort of slave labor in production of those t-shirts? So it frustrates me personally to see the amount of clothing that ends up on the UK high streets with absolutely zero traceability into how they've been produced, where they've been produced, where it's come from. You just see a little label saying made in country A, country B. So it's very frustrating, but going through this journey, it really did open my eyes to the fashion industry and how things are produced as well. So I really think one of the things that people can do is to, firstly, if you need new clothes, go for second hand. They've already been produced. You're not adding any extra resource to the planet. If you really want some new clothes, then try and find places that have sourced it ethically. It's so tempting to go to any of these high street shops that inexplicably can sell t-shirts for such cheap amounts, but the price other people pay is the real price of those products.
That's so true. And being vegan is a lifestyle choice, and it encompasses everything. I mean, one of the things I love doing is going to charity shops and seeing what I can actually find that's quirky and different, and nobody else is going to be wearing it. And you can't do that with the high street. Everybody looks the same. You can tell who's bought what from where, and the quality is not that good. And I know that the majority of materials used in these cheap sweatshop type products, they're not sustainable, they're not eco-friendly, they produce slave labor, they're very cheap and affordable, but they're also not quality. Now, what sort of material do you actually use with your products?
So I've got a few different materials. I'm actually just switching over to a newer material which has just come out in the past couple of years. It's called Tencel, which has 100% traceability from the place that farms it all the way to when you get it. So that's one of the, I'm always looking to improve, and I can't sit here saying I'm absolutely perfect, but I'm trying to look at areas where I'm not doing so well and can improve that as well. So at the moment, everything's made out of 70% bamboo and 30% cotton. That's for the t-shirts. For the tote bags that you'll see on my website, they're made out of quadruple strength cotton, which one of the things that I didn't touch on before is buying quality products as well that aren't going to fall apart. So I say this is a tote bag. A lot of tote bags that I've seen aren't going to last very long at all. And actually the environmental impact of having a poorly made bag like that you just get, that is just going to end up in landfill in under a year is really bad as well. So we need to make sure that all our products are made to a really good quality, and they're going to last you a long time. So it's not like this throwaway culture either. So the tote bags I love. They're not dyed at all, and everything is embroidered on the tote bag. So I really like the tote bag as a product because everything is sourced here from Indonesia. So I really like to see that, and I wish that there were a bit more products out there that had sustainability in mind.
Now, for my favorite part of this interview, tell me more about the animals that you've saved and the animals that you're in the process of saving, and your vision for the future.
Sure. Thanks. Well, yeah, I mean, part of why I started the clothing brand was to help fund the animal rescue that I was doing in my spare time. So in short, I was just picking up so many animals that I couldn't possibly afford to really pay for all of their vet bills. So I was ending up having to not rescue animals, and it's very, very hard to drive past an animal that you know needs help, but you don't know how you're going to be able to help them. So the idea was to try and set this up so I have a sustainable way of helping animals here as well. And then the key thing about all of this with the animal rescues is that I know how much people love dogs and cats, and I'd like to bring that uncomfortable truth that the dogs and cats that people really, really love are no really different to the pigs and cows that those same people are eating. So I kind of drop that in every now and again to try and show people that, yeah, it's if you really love these animals, there's not much of a difference between not loving different animals. So I hope that comes through. But to properly answer your question, there's no real structure, to be honest. I'm just driving from A to B, and there's a couple of markets and temple areas that I stop in, and I take my bucket of food, and I have a little medicine pouch that I take with me to help medicate animals that need medicating. So one of the main problems we see here, there's lots of problems, but one of the main problems is skin conditions. So animals will get dumped when they have a skin condition. A lot of the reason is people don't quite know what to do with them. They think they're diseased and the disease might pass to the humans or something. So there's a lack of education there, and animals get dumped. And then in those dumping areas, loads of other animals are dumped. So if one animal has a skin condition, it will quickly spread around all the other animals there. So one of the main things I do is go around with quite strong skin medication called Bravecto, which helps to kill bacterial and parasitic skin diseases. And that helps it to stop spreading and hopefully reduces the amount of animals that need rescuing in the first place. But it's, like I say, it's difficult. There still is way too many animals on the street for just me to be able to rescue. In Bali, we're quite lucky because there's a few organizations and there's lots of other people just like me who can't drive past an animal without wanting to help them, especially if they're sick and injured. So saying that, it sounds like there's always somebody to rescue an animal, but there really isn't. There's not enough sterilization programs. Females often get thrown away because they're seen as baby machines in the future. If they're sick, they get thrown away. So it's a bit of a battle, but thankfully, from my perspective, I've been able to do quite a decent job with it because I've got a few people supporting me with my Patreon and then with my clothing brand, where I can use the profits to fund those animal rescues. So I've got 4 animals at the moment that under my care, and I was really happy because I've just case closed. I've just had a dog called Homer, who I found in the bypass. He had cancer lumps all over him, and all the tumors had exploded. Sorry for getting graphic there. We managed to rescue him, and he went through a lot of chemo, and he's had such a long journey. And he's just been rehomed with a lovely lady called Nunki, and to see the animal change from this. He was just sat there, and it looked like he'd given up on life, and now he's really enjoying life. He's in a new home. So when you see the whole full circle that you can take these animals in, it's really nice to see. So I'm on a bit of a high right now because we've just confirmed his adopted home with Nunki. So it's fantastic news for Homer.
That's amazing. And when I look on your website, there are before and after shots of a lot of animals there, and it just makes you realize that we're so disconnected from how we actually treat animals. What do you say to people that have pets or can't look after pets, or are thinking about getting a pet that potentially can't look after them?
If you really want an animal, you shouldn't really get it unless you know that you can look after the animal for its whole life. Because if you come to the point where I don't know if you're talking about from a Western point of view or here in Bali point of view, but here in Bali specifically, there's a good amount of people that get puppies because they're like interesting and fun. And then when they get older, they also get thrown away. If they have any sort of skin problem or other problem, they often get thrown away. So I'd say that the main thing is if you really want an animal, firstly, you should be adopting an animal from the street. It frustrates me to see people spend thousands of dollars on dogs that have been bred when there's so many animals on the street here and all over the world that there's shelters putting animals to sleep. They're perfectly healthy, but they can't find a home. And this shouldn't happen, and it wouldn't have to happen if our human standard was to look after those that are most vulnerable in the first place, instead of serving what is effectively our desires and needs for like a cute specific breed animal, for example. So yeah, that would be my main advice.
Talking about the human standard, the way that we actually look after ourselves generally worldwide, especially our diet is a bit of a problem. When you became vegan, did you notice that your health changed or your energy changed? I mean, what was the difference?
When I used to go to the gym quite a lot, and when I come home from the gym, I'd literally drink 4 pints of cow milk because I was like, yeah, protein food, cow milk. I wasn't really very well educated with it, and I didn't really understand how protein works, for example, and about clean protein and the other things you're ingesting when you're drinking milk or animal products, what you're actually putting into your body. And like I was saying before, when you look into it, it really does become like a rabbit hole, because you're like, wow, how can this be possible? For example, one of the main causes of heart disease is from overconsumption of meat, and it's the biggest killer on the planet, I think. So it seems quite obvious that if we find something that's the biggest killer, we should try to stop doing it. And that's just for humans. The biggest killer for animals is humans. So we can take care of both of that in the same thing. But for me personally, I felt like I had a lot more energy. I didn't feel as groggy. I just felt much better. But the best feeling for me was the feeling knowing that I'm not making an animal suffer for my food. So honestly, I think I'd probably be eating vegan if it was the most unhealthy thing on the planet. I'm absolutely delighted it's not, because I can also be a healthy human being and not cause extra stress on the environment as well, extra stress on our health systems and all sorts like that. So it's funny because it seems like such a fantastic solution for animals, the environment, our health, the world, our children in the future. And sadly, it doesn't seem to be talked about much at policy level. You look at the EU at the moment, who are trying to ban the naming of items to say milk alternative, for example, whereas there are other policies as to reverse climate change. And so they have these conflicting policies that are happening that could easily change if we introduce this at policy level. But it doesn't seem to be at the moment. And that's why I think it's even more important for us as individuals to do what we can to use our voice and to keep talking about it in a calm and rational and a way that people can't really argue with. When you really lay down the facts about veganism and how it helps to create a better world, it's very difficult to then say, no, we should cut down the Amazon forest or something like that.
And it's about treating people with kindness as well on the journey and not trying to oversell to people. But what would you say to somebody that says, what do you know? You're not an expert.
Anybody, when they look into anything, they can make changes. For clothing is a really good sort of non-vegan related example. If you don't really know about it and you're going and buying like these £3 t-shirts, then yeah, I guess you can claim ignorance. But you can't claim ignorance as the excuse. You can't say, sorry, I haven't learned about it. So I think it's important for everybody to learn about it. And when you look into it and you see what we're doing, for example, the practice of chick grinding is a good example that I think almost everybody on the planet would say that's horrific. We shouldn't do this. But also 99.9% of the people on the planet probably eat eggs. So there's a disconnect there. And yeah, you don't have to be an expert to look into something and make a rational decision based on compassion, based on the environment, based on your health. You can make those choices. And yeah, of course, no, we're not all experts. That's why we also do have experts who are telling us reduce meat consumption and you'll reduce climate change, or reduce meat consumption and you'll reduce all sorts of different issues that we're getting. So let's listen to the experts. Let's do our own research, of course, and see what you think about it. And if you agree, then you can stop doing some of the things that you think are damaging the planet for you and your children and your health and the animals, of course.
If you were to give the viewers at home a tip for the environment, a tip for health, and a tip for saving the animals, what would those tips be?
Oh, that's a really nice question. I think there's a few things, but I think if you live by the ideals of veganism, which for me are deeply rooted in being a compassionate human being, it means that it doesn't end with just eating or wearing animals. It means that you look at different things with a different mindset. You think, right, if I do this, will it hurt anybody? If it does, then is there another solution for me to do it even better? The clothing is a really good example of that. It's you could still buy like a slave trade item of clothing and be a vegan, right? But like I say, if you're vegan for compassionate reasons or you're vegan for the environment, then you should probably also start looking at some of the damage that's happening to other people or the environment elsewhere in the world where the clothing is produced. So yeah, my main tip would be live by the lifestyle that you know is causing the least amount of harm, suffering, not just to animals, but people, the environment, the planet. And as I keep saying to many of my friends, the world that our children are going to inherit, because I think they're going to be pretty annoyed when they go, didn't you know about all this stuff? And people will say, well, yeah, but we didn't really do much about it.
Yeah, that's going to be an issue, and it's great that people like Greta Thunberg, they're actually young and making a difference. And when people say to you, "But I'm only one person, what can I do?" What's your answer to that?
That's a really good one as well, and it's I've heard almost every argument in the book for not doing the right thing, and it's funny. I'll give a really good example. When I first turned vegan, you couldn't get soya milk. It didn't really exist. You could kind of get it in health shops or maybe Asian markets at the time, but there certainly wasn't any plant milks in supermarkets. Since then, we've seen a huge rise in one person and another one person and another one person, and all these individual people who build up to create a whole consumer demand to the point where now half of the supermarket aisles are full of plant milks. And that's not because everybody suddenly changed at once. It's because individual people made the choice to switch and then the market responded to it. So you look at things like McDonald's now doing Beyond Burgers. Again, that's part of a response to a market because of people making individual decisions at a level where it's just you. I think there's a couple of different statistics out there, but I think the average vegan doesn't kill one animal per day, effectively, about around 365 animals a year. You will not be killing. So that's also an individual impact, and to dismiss anything you do as an individual because you're only one person kind of shirks the responsibility for me. We have a responsibility to be good people. We have a responsibility, even if we don't believe it ourselves. We have a responsibility to our children who are going to be inheriting the planet to do the right thing. So if you think that one person doesn't make a difference, I'm afraid you're using an excuse to justify your existing behavior.
Exactly. And I watched your video on should you eat McDonald's or not. And a lot of people come from the viewpoint McDonald's is an evil company. We're not supporting them. But if they've taken on board Beyond Meat burgers and Isn't it just a matter of time before they switch a lot of their products over to vegan products? And again, that one person buying that one burger can lead to millions of people buying millions of burgers, leading to no meat burgers at McDonald's. What's your take on that?
I really hope that McDonald's will change. I'm not so sure they will, in complete honesty. But the important thing just with this example is that most people who go to McDonald's are quite staunch meat eaters, right? So they'll be confronted with an option where they can have the exact same taste, the exact same flavor, which is probably one of the big blocks to them choosing veganism. Um, and they can get the exact same taste and flavor. So I'm hoping that the price will actually come down to the same level or lower, because then there really isn't a huge amount of reasoning that you can make for not eating the burger that hasn't come from the animal. So I think there's a couple of important things. The fact that people like the taste of meat and they need a alternative that tastes like meat to be able to switch. For me, I don't really miss the taste of meat, so I'm never really interested in having a meaty burger. But I totally understand that a lot of people, they have meat 2 or 3 times a day, maybe. So to have these alternatives there when before there was nothing, it's the start of a change, and they're getting exposed to veganism. So the next time they hear about veganism, they're not going to think it's such a wacky, crazy idea, because McDonald's of all people are embracing it. So I think it's really good for those reasons. For vegans, if you don't want to eat at McDonald's, fine, you don't have to. I don't think their success is of the meat-free burger is going to be based on whether vegans specifically go running into McDonald's. I think it's going to be based on whether existing meat eaters take it up, and I really hope they do. For now, at least they've got the option.
I think that's a good point, because vegans are already converted. It's a case of how do we get meat eaters to eat less meat, not just for the environment or the animals, but for their own health as well, because a lot of lifestyle diseases now are caused through diet. Again, I don't know what your perspective is from where you are in the world, because in Bali they will eat a totally different diet than we eat here. Do they eat junk food there? Do they eat high fat, a lot of meat? What's the staple Indonesian diet?
It used to be that the standard diet used to be a rice, a bit of vegetables, and some tofu and tempeh. But in recent times, this is last few decades, meat has become more of a sort of well-to-do thing. If you're having a steak, then you've got the money and things like that, and it becomes sort of a social status, to the point where if you're eating like the basic food, then you're kind of a basic worker. Whereas if you've got lots of money, you can afford lots of meat. So if you go to a lot of the sort of upper class Indonesian restaurants, sadly, you'll notice that most of it is meat, and more meat. That said, veganism is over here just as it is in different corners of the world, and a lot of people are hearing about how it can improve your health, how you can have a healthier body and mind, how you can not hurt animals as much, and how you can make the environment, your impact on the environment, lower as well. So that is getting through, and I'm delighted being in Indonesia, because there's so many local dishes that you can eat, like gado-gado and nasi gorengs and things like this, that are like accidentally vegan foods. So it's nice, especially in Bali. It's a bit of a vegan mecca. There are actually vegan restaurants all over the place here. It's not the same for wider Indonesia, but they're growing. There's more and more vegan options everywhere, and it's very similar to that soy milk example I used. There was none, and then there was a bit, and then because people started going, there was a lot more. So it snowballed, and it's snowballing here as well, which is lovely to see.
So obviously here in the West, we have factory farming, and that extends to most animals that we choose to eat. In the East, there's wet markets, and in the West, we only know what we're told about them, and we don't know why they exist or for what reason they still exist. Can you shed a bit of light, obviously living in that part of the world where they have wet markets, what happens and why they still happen?
I think it's a difficult one to answer, really. Most people's automatic reaction to hearing that a wet market, or this is a market where live animals are kept and they're slaughtered on site and given to the customer right there and then. And the argument is that there's a lot of emerging diseases that can come from that because of poor hygiene standards. While it's true, hygiene standards can be really, really bad in here and not that well enforced always. It would be difficult for Western countries to tell other countries what to do when we have these massive confined animal operations happening all over the world. I think the last big pandemic, the 1913 one, actually came from America, came from a farm in America. So the emerging diseases, I think it was 3 out of 4 emerging diseases actually come from our interactions with animals and what we're doing to animals. So the solution to me seems semi-clear in that if we all work together and looked at where they were coming from, and they're normally animal farming operations. So a wet market is an animal farming operation, but so is a chicken farm with 20,000 chicken, or a pig farm, an intensive pig farm where swine flu might come from. So I think some people might think it's like diseases often come from the East, which is really, really incorrect, because a lot of them, and if you have a look at the latest diseases that have come about, you'll see that it's a mix, basically. And that's because hygiene standards everywhere aren't that good. And as long as we're keeping animals in small spaces where they're living in their own feces and spreading disease to each other, it can jump to animals. So unless we sort out our factory farming, it's going to be very difficult for us to tell other countries what to do.
So there's a wealth of information there from you, Aron. Thank you for being part of this summit. Thank you for spreading the vegan word, and thank you for encouraging people to care more about the environment, care more about animals, and care about their own health a little bit more.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it, and I hope some of my thoughts may have impacted people out there. If they have, fantastic. Really appreciate being on, and best of luck with this awesome project you've got going on.